Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Commio's February Cloud Communications Industry Briefing. My name is Tim McLain. I'm the marketing director here at Commio, and I'm really excited today to be talking about RCS slash text messaging. How do the two work together on top of each other? What's unique to this new thing called RCS? And how to choose the right experience, or I think we'd argue at the end of this, the right experiences for our businesses and our customers. And I'm super excited to have with me Michael Lamb, who's the co-founder and president of nativeMsg. Michael, welcome in.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear from you, and I want to introduce your native message to our folks that have tuned in, and then we'll
Yep.
have a great discussion about this. But I want to start with something interesting. So, Michael, over the weekend, I literally was sitting doing some work on my computer. My phone went off, and I was shocked that I'm a Walgreens customer. I think a lot of you out there that are tuned in today may get your prescriptions filled there. And I'm an older guy. I need a statin. Okay, so it happens. Finally, I've been putting it off forever. And I do remember a time where when Walgreens would text me, this is what I would get on the left. So we both know what
Yep.
this is, right, Mike? This is a long code. And I'm sure Walgreens has had, 21525 forever. And this is what they
Yep.
used to look like. And it's funny because, you and I have been talking for a couple of weeks now, and I've been working on RCS related materials. And it just dawned on me, wait a minute, for the last few months, it's looked a little different. And I realized that I, this weekend, was got my first in the wild live example of an RCS message delivered to my iPhone. So I'm a Verizon customer.
Yep.
And look how nice that looks now. It's not just a block of text there. It's got a little, pill bottle, and it literally um,
Yep.
has a link inside of it. And look at the very bottom, everybody, too. Again, this is Verizon embedding text message dash RCS. So,
Yep.
I think I have, my iPhone is 2 generations old, but obviously it has the newer iOS. So I'm able to get RCS messages now. And
Correct.
and
Yep.
here's the other thing, Michael, because again, I'm getting older and slower, and there's gray up here. Is look at the very top, everybody. What I love about this is there's no 21525 or whatever the long code was. There's a logo for Walgreens. There's no phone number up there, and it's telling you what it is. And look at that beautiful check mark, Mike, right?
Yep.
That is showing that the brand Walgreens has registered themselves. They're doing an RCS campaign. Look how great the messages look. And here's the cool thing is, as a customer, I don't trust anything that hits my phone these days, whether it's a call or a text message. But when you click on that W at the top, this is what pops up. And look at
Yep.
this beautiful thing. So I know the brand. It's verified by Verizon. And here's all the contact information for them who sent for the organization who sent me this message. Imagine everybody who's on this call if all of your messages came with this level of brand integrity, right? This is what, for me, like literally the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Like, this is where I really want to see messaging. I think we all do messaging go in 2025. By the way, there's also a solution for the calling side called branded calling, but that's for another day. But Mike, anything you want to add about this? This is exciting. This is live today.
Correct. So
Yeah.
at this point in the US, Verizon, as you mentioned, you're on Verizon. Verizon is the first to actually launch RCS business messages. And I think real quick, for your audience, there's two different versions of RCS. There's the version of RCS that enables an iPhone to talk to an Android, because previously Apple spoke Apple and Android spoke Android. That was a problem, right? They couldn't communicate. Now they both speak RCS. So now you'll have seamless experiences across all devices, group chats, family chats, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So you'll see RCS down in the chat window for that. But then this is RCS business messaging. And this is really the future of how businesses are going to be delivering content to all of us and enabling us to interact with them as well directly inside the text messaging app on the phone.
That's right. That's right. And that's important to understand. It's like, and again, you don't need to build an app potentially for your business based on the experience you're trying to provide. These show up right inside the native messaging apps on your phone. So exciting. So we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but I'd like to really share
Yep,
this
that's
great
awesome. It's
example.
great.
But
Yeah.
it's so exciting. So, Mike, I'd love for everybody else on the call too to understand more about who's Native Message, where you guys coming from, and you've been working with RCS now for how many years has it been? 6 or 7 years? How long?
7 years, yeah,
Wow.
since 2018. We actually
Okay.
started Native Message in 2017.
Okay.
Uh, but really, the whole idea behind Native Message is there is a void in the marketplace right now of solutions for developing RCS business messaging experiences, right?
Right.
I can go to any number of any aggregators and sign an agreement and get connectivity and be able to send an RCS message, and that's great. But now what? What do I do now? What do I want to do when I want to integrate my Shopify store, when I want to pull in information from my CRM? Because really, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's where the real power lies with RCS. Obviously, the branded stuff is phenomenal. The check marks, all of that from a consumer standpoint is great. But once you really start to bring in different functionality, features, options, use cases, this thing starts to open up into a entirely brand new UI for businesses interacting with consumers.
You got it.
And that's really what we do is we provide the solution to do that. That is a no code solution or API and can get people up and running with RCS, very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And Michael, honestly, when I first found you on LinkedIn a couple months ago, my brain was very much in the, look, at Commio, we've done the voice and messaging, sort of the interconnect piece. And then, for instance, we interact really, really well with Twilio. And guess what Twilio
Yep.
is? They're basically like, sort of for programmable voice and messaging, what you are to RCS. So it sort of brought us together to really have a conversation because, it's all well and good to be able to deliver a call or a message, but being able to build the experience or, yeah, of course, in Twilio's case, it's an IVR flow or whatever. You guys are able to build with a very similar tool, sort of the flow for a RCS experience. So very exciting, very
Yeah. And
complementary.
I think the other thing, just to mention Tim real quick too, is, one of the conversations that you and I had early on was, you know, we're not really a competitor, right?
Yeah,
We're an
right.
enabler.
Yep.
That's really what our focus is. Our focus isn't on, going into the marketplace and taking everybody's connectivity away, right? It's
Yeah,
really about enabling the market with RCS. And that's why, working with you guys just makes a ton of sense,
right.
because there's a lot there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sorry, the jargon is BYOC, right? Bring your own carrier. So
yep.
you come to Native Message, build something, and then hey, when you want to send it, we'd love for you to send it through Commio. We have the
Yep.
connectivity. So it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
But let's real quick, Mike, give everybody a history of this. So it's hard to believe it. It feels like yesterday, but it's been a long time ago. The first SMS was sent back in 92. Man, I was still in college. It still feels like yesterday. But back then it was sort of the 160 characters max. MMS didn't really come along until 2002, but really
Yep.
things started to take off in '08 when smartphones hit, right? When the iPhone
Yeah.
first hit.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where we sort of saw these things split, which, it's interesting to note here, 2008, that Android has basically had RCS, since its origination, right? So we sort of break things up. There was Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, and then there was RCS, which was native to Android up until only a few months ago that Apple finally enabled it, right?
Yep.
And by the way, just real
And the
quick, Mike,
reason for that is,
I was
just so
going to ask.
everybody knows, is
Yeah,
that Google is the one that's pushing RCS
right.
very hard right now. Google is the one that is enabling the mobile network operators to support RCS, to launch RCS campaigns.
Yeah,
So, right, Google
yeah.
also owns Android. Makes perfect sense.
There you go. That's right. And it was interesting that it wasn't until 2011 that Apple basically debuted iMessage, but it was iPhone to iPhone only. But as you said, now RCS is rolled out and is now, iPhone to Android and back and forth, which
You got it. Yep.
I have an identical twin brother. He's always been an Android guy. He will never pick up an Apple device. And finally, his insistence on being all Android has not ruined our text chats for the family anymore. So that's been nice.
There we go. Yep.
Side benefit. But then as we continue, business messaging really didn't start picking up until, again, sort of the early to mid 2000s. And we all know on this call, I'm sure a lot of the folks I see here, short codes came along, toll free came along and long code, right? So we sort of started to build the messaging infrastructure with these different types of numbers with all their different capabilities, which we all know most people really love 10DLC because you can look truly local and you can buy a
Yep.
bunch of these numbers and all that good stuff. And then things started to get interesting. So we're all familiar with TCPA, and there's rules around, written rules for calling. But then TCR hit in 2020. And look, I've been at Commio now, working through my 6th year here. And when I first got here, it was the Wild West of messaging. Like
Exactly. Exactly.
you could send whatever traffic you wanted down whatever rails you wanted, and it didn't matter whether it was A to P or P to P, right? And now, oh boy. And I think it's a good thing, right, Mike? I think you'd agree. Like, we're starting with KYC, which is very much in the news these days. We have to know our customers before they get onto our network. But then on top of it, it does make sense to have to register these campaigns and make sure that they're vetted, right? To a certain
Well, and I
extent.
think the important thing that we all know, but sometimes don't necessarily pay attention to, is that for every one of those weird, your package, is at this place and we need your help or this or that, there's
Yeah.
100 messages that we get that have a tremendous amount of value.
Right.
And that's the piece that's really interesting and has always been, I've been in messaging for over 20 years, is that one bad message
Yeah.
makes so much noise, but the one that tells you that your kids don't have school today because of snow, you're like, oh, great, cool, wow, that's awesome.
Right.
So there's this balance of, right, like value driven messages and then all of the noise. And if we can tone down some of the noise, I think that's good for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And this whole brand verification and those are all good things. But I think it's important to note, Mike, you would agree that there's still some unanswered questions about RCS and RCS business messaging today, right? Like so I think the first thing for people to understand is that RCS is not a replacement for SMS and MMS. It's simply it's a tool that allows you to build app-like experiences in the native messaging apps, right? And there's
Correct.
still, and not every carrier supports it yet. We don't really know what the pricing is. And I think more importantly is, I just mentioned the TCR, like we don't even really know what the rules of the road are going to be for registering campaigns potentially. We don't know what the rules are quite yet, right?
Right. But I think they're going to mimic, what we're doing with 10DLC. I think they'll mimic what's happening with branded calling. I think, eventually it's kind of one entry into the whole space. You verify your brand, and then you have the ability to create these campaigns in different places.
Right.
But yes, still definitely a work in progress
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure. But it's all happening, so
It's all
which is the good
happening.
thing, right?
Exactly. It's happening this year, and
Yep.
we're well into it, and we're excited because there are some folks that have been in this industry for a long time who said, "Oh, RCS has been around for 16 years now. It's not going to
Yep.
happen." It's like, guys, like, hold on, no, no, no. It's all the right things are lining up. You have the relationships, we have the relationships. Things are coming together quickly. That's why it's important to have this webinar. By the way, before we continue, I want to encourage everybody to use the chat feature. Love for you to ask questions if you have thoughts, questions for Mike or I as we go, and we can make this interactive. So feel free to use that feature. So
And
as I
then I
already,
would just add real
yeah,
quick, Tim, like when the
sure,
smartphone came out, text
yeah,
messaging was supposed to die. When the apps came out, text messaging was supposed to die. When
right,
this came out, text messaging in it itself, SMS and MMS, isn't going to go anywhere,
no,
right? Just like the
yeah,
majority of us use multiple messaging apps, we'll continue to do that. There's certain use cases it's good for, and there's certain use cases, as we'll talk about here, SMS and MMS are still good for. So,
yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So again, if we put them side by side, we're all familiar with SMS, those trusty text-based messages with links inside of them. No media, we can get to almost any device with it. And we all know that Twitter basically made their original message size based on what an SMS was all those years ago.
yep.
And then, of course, we added on MMS, where, especially during the political season, we get, an image with a block of text with a link underneath, which is, has its own uses as well. But then, Mike, tell us a little bit more about these OTT apps as well that bolt on top.
So really, it's like, the I think the biggest one obviously is WhatsApp,
Right.
right? 2 billion users all over the place, 98% penetration, Brazil, India, a lot of countries like that. And really,
Yeah.
WhatsApp came about. because of the high cost of text messages in certain countries, and data was a little cheaper. So that's really kind of what drove a lot of these over the top apps. So you have WhatsApp, you have Viber, you have Telegram, you have Line, you have, WeChat, Kik, all in kind of different countries, different purposes. And those are really, right, messaging apps like Facebook Messenger, as we mentioned,
Right.
um, that are part of your kind of messaging ecosystem, right?
Yep.
If you have friends that are on Discord, you talk to them on Discord. If you have friends that are on Facebook Messenger, Facebook Messenger. So, and that's why, one isn't going to kill all of them. They're all going to coexist because everybody uses more than one and has for years.
That's right. Yeah, it's really interesting because, Mike, I talked to a lot of other people who are in our space, but they primarily work with people that are overseas. And it's amazing to me how universally adopted WhatsApp is, but not in
Yep.
the US. So I don't know a single person who uses WhatsApp here, which is very interesting to me. It's just maybe one of those aberrations of our global marketplace, but I just find it interesting. Um, of course, we already mentioned iMessage, and last but not least is RCS. And by the way, Steve had a
Yep.
great question following up on my initial example with Walgreens, which is he asked, well, if Walgreens is using RCS, what happens to the non-Verizon customers? Short code fallback, and I think we were talking about that before we got on the line. So, what happens if they're trying to deliver that message and the person on the other end doesn't support RCS yet?
Sure. So what happens typically is it's referred to as a fallback,
Yeah,
or what we refer to, using our platform, we have an emulator, which is basically the ability to take that same RCS experience, make it come to life inside of a browser. So a device that does not support RCS gets an SMS or an MMS with a link, and then they click that link, and then they go into the exact same experience, which people have called kind of a conversational landing page or
right.
something along those lines, because you're still in, this chat interface and interacting, through
Yeah,
there. So the reality is nothing changes except the people that support RCS get RCS.
yeah,
So it's all upside, because it's not like you're going to stop doing SMS and SMS doesn't exist. It still does. You're
yeah,
just taking a portion of your traffic that has the ability to get the best message possible and sending them the best message possible. And
yep,
everybody else gets what they're already getting until it,
yeah.
until it all catches up.
Yeah, by the way, and not to jump too far ahead, but it also, I understand from a reporting standpoint, like, sort of the text message delivery to the carriers with always best effort. You get read receipts, but you're not ever really sure what they got on the other end. But with RCS, the data is much better, right? And also in terms of billing, which we don't have pricing yet, but if the
Right.
RCS message is delivered, it's a different price, right? And but they know
Well,
whether it
there's
was
going to
delivered or
be,
not.
yep, there's going to
Yeah,
be different pricing. But I think to your point, really, I think what you're getting at is that inside of what RCS really does is it brings Google Analytics type visibility into the text messaging app on the device. So now I know that you got it. I know you read it. I know what time you looked at it. I know what you touched on. And again, it all can come across as a little creepy, but it's really not. It's
yeah,
really more about understanding the customer in the best way possible to deliver the best experience. And in the process of them going through interactions inside of RCS, you have the ability to gain a lot of insights
yeah,
into the users. And, most customers, when you look at any kind of, reporting or reports or stats, are really open to sharing information if they're getting something back on the other side.
right.
That's the piece, right? What's the value exchange that's happening inside of that interaction?
That's right. That's right. And by the way, back to the Walgreens example again, like for instance, when I got that RCS message, when I clicked on the RX status, it took me to their website in a mobile format to give me the update on the prescription. So,
Yep.
by the way, I'm not even sure if Walgreens has an app. I should probably know that. I wonder if I installed the app whether it would have taken me to the app. It probably would have. But
You
it
can
was,
do that. Yep. You can deep
yeah,
link right from RCS directly into an application
yeah.
also. There's a
I mean,
lot of
yeah.
very cool functionality that most people are just not aware of.
Yeah, what's interesting though is like so in that example though, they if RCS had come along a little sooner, they may not even have had to make an app because they could do the entire process anyway. And by the way, Steve
They
had a
could
follow
have.
up. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
But
Steve had a follow-up.
apps have their place and
Oh,
people
sure.
love them. So it'll be
Right.
a little while.
Yeah. Steve had a follow-up. He goes, is Walgreens, and I think he thinks that maybe Delta Airlines is also testing RCS. It feels like they're testing it. So we were talking earlier that they probably are
Yep.
working directly like with Verizon, right? As sort of
A lot
early.
of that,
Yeah.
Google and the carriers, right? A lot of the larger brands, there's existing relationships there. So it's
Yeah.
very easy for them to kind of go, hey,
Yeah.
why don't you guys take a look at this? But
Right.
it's also getting started, right?
Yeah.
It's like with any of this,
Yep.
the sooner you get started, the more you learn, the better you know, you start checking all the boxes.
That's right. That's right. Well, and let's take a step back again to Mike and talk about sort of how to choose. So, we already mentioned that RCS has the built-in fallback feature. So, especially as you're thinking about if you're somebody out there that's either, selling this to other companies or you're a big brand logo, how would you decide what to invest in terms of what to develop on? Like, should you go right to RCS? I don't know. How do you sort of think about how to choose?
No, so from an RCS perspective, I think, right, it's very early. Um, this is not a place at this point in time yet where there are massive amounts of case studies and white papers, and there's been loads of traffic, and right,
Yeah.
lots of brands have used it. Now, globally, there's quite a few that have, and there are statistics that are coming out, and they are showing that it's definitely much more effective. But if US is really kind of your focus, where you start is starting to understand the functionality, the capabilities, the features, all of that. How are you using your application and your messaging currently? How do those kind of come together? And basically looking at those two, what can we move into RCS to start to take this new functionality that's available inside of RCS?
Right.
So it's
Right.
really it's more about getting started, like I said earlier, than kind of
Yeah.
sitting and waiting to see,
Yeah.
what's everybody else doing. Well, you're going to see what everybody else is doing, and then you're already behind.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say too, you guys have some great examples built right onto your native message website that sort of has some use cases, excuse me, and
Yep,
some built-in examples, which are great
for
starting points to
sure.
think about. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yep,
Um, and again, we don't really need to rehash this too much, but obviously SMS has been around forever. SMS and MMS now are very well established, especially, depending on what you're trying to do. And we won't stop sending 2FAs right through
no,
through
and
text.
that's
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, when you look at the amount of text messaging traffic globally, and you look at it from a percentage basis, it's
yeah,
a lot of two-factor authentication. It's a lot of different types of messages that don't necessarily require RCS.
right.
So when you're looking at, from a cost perspective, it's potentially cheaper to send an SMS than an RCS. And if you're sending it to FA,
Yeah,
you know, but you don't get the branding, you don't get the logo, you don't get the check mark, right? You don't get all of that. So it's a balance of, right? It's a return on spend, basically. It's like, do you want to spend more to get that? And does that actually drive more? Or do you keep doing what you're doing? And again, that's really where this A/B testing comes in, is that you really have to start to understand which one does work better.
yeah,
And the only way to
yeah,
know that is to use it and put it out there, because if you're relying on what everybody else is doing, that's not really the best thing to do, in my opinion, because what you're going to do in your business and how you do, everybody's different.
yeah.
And you have to look at it through your lens, not somebody else's lens.
That's right. That's right. Well, Alan had a great question about which use cases we feel are the most appropriate for leveraging RCS, and I think Alan, the answer is that's going to be our next webinar. So you beat me to the next punch of we do have some fantastic examples that we're going to keep you guys. We don't want to keep you on here all day, so we're going to split that into a separate webinar. But there's some great
Yep.
examples that Michael has given me that we want to share with you guys.
Yeah.
Um, but we already mentioned OTT apps, right? Like WhatsApp, and
Yep.
they definitely increase the capability of that delivery mechanism. And basically they have to have the app, right, in order to use it. It makes perfect sense. So it doesn't work directly through a native app. So that's kind of the upside of RCS coming soon. It may actually sort of circumvent the need for WhatsApp. eventually. But
Well, we've
I,
been talking to
yeah,
some folks down in Brazil where, RCS and Android penetration, 90, 95%, very high. And WhatsApp always comes up. But then once they see an RCS message and they see RCS and what it can do and what it looks like, and then they compare that to WhatsApp,
mm,
there are clear differences.
right,
So again, it comes down to, are you as a business really leveraging WhatsApp to deliver, effective communications? Or does it make sense to look at RCS? I mean, I say it makes sense to look at all of them because you
sure,
don't know how somebody wants to receive, information, and RCS is just there.
yeah,
You don't have to
yeah.
do anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just native to the app, right? And that's the best part
Yep,
is it shows up in
exactly.
the native. You don't have to do any development work.
So
You've got a low code interface for creating the experience. And I think it all comes back to experience. I think
right.
we're all sick of seeing the letters CX everywhere, but CX really matters. And it's like, what is your user trying to accomplish? And what's the best way to do it? It doesn't really matter what the channel is anymore. It's going to work
No,
across the devices. Yeah.
exactly. And it really shouldn't because there are lots of tools out there to, address all of this. I don't think anybody's really figured it out entirely.
Yeah.
Um, but there's tons of solutions out there to make sure that you can communicate with folks across all different channels. So
Yeah, and by the way, Mike, so Steve brought up another point, which I was just going to bring up, is that the one thing that people are saying is that, well, WhatsApp is encrypted from, from start to finish, right? But
sure.
RCS is not. Like, how do you talk to folks that have concerns about end-to-end encryption?
I think it comes down to what is your concern with encryption more than anything, right? Because if you want to have an encrypted experience and WhatsApp works for you, then keep using WhatsApp. But if you're going to go and do an appointment reminder or reschedule an appointment, is the fact that it's not encrypted end to end that important to you? Tim, I don't, it's
Yeah,
the whole thing is very interesting to me because there's a lot of folks that are hardcore encryption, and then there's a lot of folks that don't say anything. So I think it really just comes down to the user and the person and what people are comfortable with. I don't think that anything's being unencrypted and then stored and captured and sent off somewhere so that it's all top
yeah,
secret. And it's from a billing perspective.
yeah,
It's to make sure that they're not sending out stuff that is in violation of the terms that you've agreed to, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not meant in any way to harm or hurt the consumer. It's meant to help
yeah.
from that perspective. But with that said, I do understand that is important for some people, and there's lots of tools out there that are encrypted end to end that enable you to do that. With that said, Google is aware of it, GSMA is aware of it. There are RCS specs where there's going to be what's referred to as a web view, which is available inside of RCS, just like when you go to a browser inside of Instagram or another right over the top messaging app. You're not actually going to Safari or Chrome or Firefox. You're staying in that app. The same thing will exist. So there's solutions also being put together to address all of that.
Yeah.
And they're also working on the end-to-end encryption. Again, I think people have to remember RCS has been around for a long time, but RCS has really just started taking off in the last 18 months, 2 years globally, right? Because we're
Yeah.
not just talking about US here. We're talking about Brazil, Italy, Germany, Spain, France, India, South Africa, Japan, China, right? It's all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I totally hear you. By the way, Preston and Mark, two great questions here, and I'm going to save these for a little bit later. We'll get through a couple more slides, but got some great questions filling up, which I always love to see.
Yeah.
Um, so iMessage obviously is its own thing, sort of Apple to Apple.
Yep.
Um, and I think we've all used it, but again, sort of no campaigns allowed, right? So it's sort of segmenting out the business messaging piece of it as well.
Yeah. And
Um,
if you think about iMessage is an over the top app that
yeah,
just exists inside of the Apple ecosystem.
That's right.
Apple does have something called Apple Messages for Business, which people could potentially confuse for RCS. It does look different. It's also not something that is initiated by a brand or a company. It's more customer care. So if I want to reach out to a brand and I want to communicate with them, I initiate that interaction, and then it's just simply a customer care vehicle, really.
Interesting. I did not know that. Huh.
Yep. Yep. Most
And
people
again,
don't.
yeah. And again, back to RCS. So a whole new world. And again, we really want to focus on we're creating app-like experiences in the native messaging apps, either on Android or Apple.
Yep.
And again, I think some early limitations are obviously it's brand new. This is the year it's going to be implemented. We're still waiting on carriers to, adopt it. We don't know what the rules of the road are yet. And also, even comes down to the iOS version that people are running. So,
Correct. Yep.
and you already mentioned that it puts Google Google Analytics metrics, which I think for marketers and businesses is a huge win.
It is a
Yeah,
massive game changer because if
yeah,
you think about it, right, and you know this, I know this,
yeah,
messaging is incredibly effective, or else people wouldn't keep paying for it and using it, right?
yeah,
If it doesn't work, you don't keep using it. Now you're basically taking this channel that is incredibly effective that doesn't have a lot of visibility, and now you're layering in the ability to integrate third name, right? It just basically opens up the text messaging app to an entirely brand new world of use cases, features, functionality. There's just so much cool stuff that's coming.
yeah, yeah. And as a marketer, I feel like people that I interact with and trying to sell them our services understand that if they get an email from me and they visit my website, I'm going to know that they should already know that I'm going to know that they got the email, they opened it, they clicked it, they landed on my website, they spent 2 minutes there, they clicked on this X, Y, and Z. I can see all that data. So now it finally brings that level of sophistication to messaging, which will be
Yep.
hugely valuable. So we'll know what's
Yep.
working, what's not working. And you already mentioned too
Absolutely.
that, yeah, so RCS has been out, obviously been used in other countries. So there is initial data that's coming out about, basically RCS is outperforming MMS in terms of all the metrics that matter to a business. So there's some early data that shows that it's being more effective. So that's good to
Yeah,
know.
we've done a couple of campaigns up in Canada, quite a few actually. And the results, it's pretty much if you take an MMS and then you A/B test it versus what's referred to as a rich card in RCS speak. We've seen a doubling of click-through rates just as a baseline across the board.
Wow.
And then we've seen other campaigns as high as, like I think the one was 339% increase. So, and those are very simple campaigns. That's really basically, I have an MMS, I'm going to put it inside an RCS rich card, and I'm going to send it out to two different groups and see what happens, right? Just real straightforward stuff. So once you start to get into, enabling that user to kind of do a deeper dive into that experience and learn more and carousels and videos and all kinds of other stuff, it's incredibly engaging. You're capturing people's attention. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to convert better.
Yeah.
And I know, hyperbole aside,
Sure.
like it does.
Yeah.
So I can say that it will because it does, right? You know what I mean? Like
Sure. I gotcha. I gotcha.
there's data out there.
Right. Yeah, but wait, there's more, right? And I love this part. We talked about it earlier on, is that, RCS message senders are verified by Google. It's very similar to the campaign registry, KYC requirements, and that establishes a baseline of trust. And obviously, this is, I've mentioned handled by Google. The messages are branded, right, when they go out, and
Yep.
it's no longer coming from a random phone number that we know changes all the time. Now, not a short code, but especially on toll free and 10DLC, like you're going to see a different number half the time from these guys every time. And it makes it hard to trust it. It always has. And this just takes that out of the loop. Like now there's just a brand at the top and we see a check mark. And again, it just, as you've said, has created some early wins in terms of data of effectiveness, which is great.
Right. And you think about it, when you receive that message and you're seeing this on your device, Tim,
Yeah.
is when you go back to that Walgreens example,
Yep.
right? there's no phone number, it's all the company information, but also it stays there. So
Yes.
now you have this contact, if you will, that exists inside of your text messaging app that is
Oh
this
yeah.
business. So if you wanted to go back to Walgreens and had a question, you
Right.
could ask a question, right? If they were started to send out coupons or offers, they started to build in your loyalty card, and then that gets saved in your digital wallet. And right, you get the
Got it.
idea. Like it just
Right.
starts to blossom.
That's wow. That's awesome. By the way, Steve's asking a question here. He goes back to the RCS Google Analytics like metrics. So
Yeah.
how quickly are those delivered? Is it real time or is it similar? Like how quickly can you get access to that data? And can a brand have sub brands tied to it? Two different questions.
So from the analytics perspective, it depends on the platform, right? So there's really three different pieces that make RCS come to life. There's the carrier. So you have Verizon has to support it. You have the device, which is the iPhone, like you have Tim, which supports it. So that's great. So now what? What does someone do? What does someone interact with? What is the experience? And that's really the space where we play is building out those experiences. So I can speak to our tool using our tool. When someone touches something, it's all in real time. So you
Yeah.
know what's happening in real time as they're interacting with it. You're getting a copy of it, if you will, in some sense back to our platform so that you have the ability to view history and look at all of that. There's attributes that are captured and stored. So from the standpoint of, in real time, it can be accessed in real time from whatever, I mean, obviously incredibly biased, but whoever you use or whatever platform you have, you should make sure that you have access to all of that data so that you can use it, in real time to make adjustments or just to understand what's going on with your campaigns, while it's
Yeah.
happening.
Right.
And then can a brand have sub brands tied to it? So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that question. In the terms of RCS, when you register a brand, that brand is then, it's like 10DLC. You get a phone number. That phone number is for a specific purpose. It's for a specific company, and it's used for that. So you can't necessarily have an RCS agent that was registered for one purpose doing 10 different things that it wasn't registered for.
Right. Right.
I don't
Right.
know if
Right.
that answers the question or not, but that's kind of
Yeah,
how it works.
I think Michael, this is a question that comes up a lot on our webinars because we have a lot of folks that are going to be basically, we sell to them and then they have customers
Yep.
under them. So I think
Yep.
it sounds like it's going to end up like a lot like you already mentioned with the campaign registry and things. Like
100%.
each of those brands are going to have to register themselves. You're going to have to work with them to get them registered, right?
Correct. Now,
And
that doesn't mean you only can have one RCS experience, right?
right.
If you're a large brand, you could have an e-commerce experience, a customer care experience. Walgreens could just have a pharmacy experience
Yep.
versus a, store experience. So it's not like you get one and then you have one and you have to figure out how to shove everything into it. You get one to start, figure out how it all works, and then you come up with your plan around, do we have, I mean, I don't recommend having 20 of them unless there's a really good use case for it, but having two or three, I think, a lot of large brands will do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I did notice, and I'm struggling to remember what the Walgreens one said, but it said I don't know if it said promotional, it said like prescription or whatever. You're right. So there was sort of like
Promotional, yep. Yep.
promotional. So you could have like as you mentioned, one brand with two or three of those sort of use cases that are their own unique channel, right? Or stream
Yep. Well, think about
experience.
employee communications too,
Yeah,
right? You want to have one that's internal for
right.
employee communications, and then you want to have external, right, for consumers and customers and all of that. So,
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. All right, great.
yep.
And by the way, here's a great example. So when Commio set up our sort of ourselves with Google and we started to test. This is what our brand looks like on RCS. So you can see down here. So here's our phone number, our support number. So when and we're not really we don't send text messages ourselves to be honest right now, but we're verified. We have a promotional account and we're all ready to go. So what's great about this, what we love about this is obviously, again, you think about all the brands that are sending you text messages today. You're not sure whether it's real or not. You're not sure whether they're verified or not. There's way too many scams going on. This cuts through that finally with, nope, you're only seeing a brand. You can see who they are. And by the way, look at the bottom. Like these people have gone through a know your customer.
100%.
Yeah,
Yep.
and you can literally call their main phone number and be like, I just got this from you. And it's just, again, it's kind of amazing that we live in the world now where this is not possible with the current technology, and there's so much you don't know who's actually sending you any of this stuff. You just don't know. And this is the year you will know, and you'll be able to actually reach back out to them directly, which
And
is
it's really
exciting.
funny that, that all of these businesses and companies are required to go through this lengthy process and prove who they are and do
Yeah.
all of these other things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they're still sending a message from a 10-digit number that nobody knows what it is. So you have to
Right.
explain who you are, right? So this,
Yep.
again, to your point, this addresses a ton of issues that exist out in the marketplace right now.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to get too far ahead of us here, but so we're talking about RCS, but here at Commio, we're also working on branded calling. So what I'm hoping is by the end of this year, we can finally say from voice to messaging, the trust has been restored in the ecosphere. If the brands invest a little bit of money, time, and energy to adopt RCS and branded calling. And again, you don't have to brand all your calls. You can just brand the ones you want to make sure, have this logo and this information associated with them. These are important calls. People will finally be able to trust their phones, maybe for the first time. And
And
that's
even
very
with the
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, with the branded calling, right? It's just
Yep.
a better, everybody still gets the same experience.
Yeah.
Now you're just delivering a better experience to a portion of your users. And once you start doing that,
Right.
you start to see the results from that because
Yeah.
we as consumers are going to pay attention to that.
Yeah. And even like it's a safety issue too. Like, there's lots of examples of, scams that are being run on behalf of like hospitals and things like that. Like, I don't want to have to worry about that. Like if God forbid somebody in my family's in the hospital and they're calling me with an update on their condition, like I want to see that hospital logo and see that information come through. Like there's so many other
Exactly.
uses for it. Trust,
Yep.
and it's exciting. It's exciting. And by the way, I always find this funny, Mike, that the first example that was all over the internet about RCS is the next big thing is something that you can get inside of an airline app. But it's
Yep.
true. It's true. So you're just taking the information that's available, reformatting it into an app experience, delivering it to the native app. So this is give you a good idea of the kinds of things that an RCS message can do. And again, you said this a lot. We were prepping. It's like we're getting away from typing. We're going to tapping, right? It's all about tapping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more, because typing is the number one friction point on a phone. The more you
Yes.
require people to type,
Yeah.
the your conversions tank
Yeah.
because they don't want to type, right? They don't really want to do it. And this is an example of the ability to take some functionality from an application and move it into RCS. Will
Yep.
RCS kill apps in general? I don't think so, right? Uber's not going to go anywhere, but maybe an Uber now sends me an RCS for my rating for the driver,
Yes.
right? So now
Right.
you start to see multiple channels being blended together to deliver different experiences. And if I have to just go into my text messaging app to rent a car, book a flight, check my hotel, and make reservations at a restaurant instead of having to go into four different apps,
Right.
tremendous amount of value there as well.
Exactly. And by the way, Steve's asking, I think, the $1 million question, which is, what's the best guesstimate for the carriers to be ready for this? Not just Walgreens and Delta, who are working like directly with Verizon. I know we've been saying
So
2025, but it's coming.
I would say it's really probably Q3.
Hmm.
Um, T-Mobile's getting ramped up. And they're getting ready to start bringing on some brands. I do know AT&T will be the last.
Yeah.
That was, Q1, Q2. So I think, right, things got to get worked out. Everybody's got to go through these tests. They have to start working with these big brands and make sure everything is working right. Again, if anybody remembers the early days of text messaging
Yeah.
back in 2001, 2, and 3, we went through all of this back then.
Yeah.
You couldn't send a text message from Sprint to Verizon. You couldn't, right? And now it's everywhere. And it'll take a little bit of time. And once all of this gets worked out, and once all the kinks get worked out, and it's working the way everybody wants it to, and people can get registered, and
Right.
you know, you have to imagine there's a lot of people in line for this. So
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
Although it's been great to be well ahead of the curve here at Commio with working on the back end of this. We started early last year, so it's good to
Yep.
see it come to fruition as we get ready for this year. And by the way, we actually created this early example. This was our product team sort of working with me on a little sort of promotional piece. And again, this is probably is this like one of the rich cards you were talking about earlier? It's just sort of,
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
very simple. You got a little video that'll get your quote. And guess what? That links directly to our website to the get a quote page. It
Yep.
could have just as easily linked if we had an app and we don't. But you can see on the bottom right here as well, look at the brand at the top, a little summary of who we are, and down here, literally, we can have additional little clickable items like get your quote, compare
Exactly.
features. This is a very basic example. Yeah.
Yep.
So not a bad way to start. And this was our product team getting their feet wet on it as we were building things. And by the way, Mike, I'd love for you to kind of, if we could step through these. So here's a couple examples I took from your website shamelessly.
Yep.
The first one is a
So
banking one, right? Yeah.
yeah, and this basically is just more around, letting someone know about a different offer or promotion that's available, kind of giving you a little nudge. You'll notice that someone clicks yes, I am aware, and then it goes down, and then it gives them some other options there. So it's really kind of a quick little example to get somebody's attention.
Yeah.
Here's a package example, which is kind of funny. Most of the package examples now are that I forgot it, I left it at the place and have to go pick it up. But
Right.
now, imagine, you get your UPS or your FedEx or your DHL or whoever it is. There's a tremendous amount of trust there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not least, this is my favorite one.
Yep. So, and
Like,
here's one where, right, there's a carousel. You're basically, product discovery,
yeah.
giving somebody the ability to understand what their options are, what's available. I'm at this resort. I'm interested in this one. Boom, book now. And then it walks me through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm about to do a cruise with my wife, and I would love for this to be my experience of booking excursions, right? Like,
I
hey,
know,
you're on the
right?
ship now. Click, 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 click. Don't go stand in line with
Exactly.
the rest of the rest of the passengers and get COVID while you're waiting. Sorry, I said that out loud.
It's
Um,
all right.
so we already went through a couple of these things. Verizon, as we know, Walgreens was a great example. They're up and running.
Yep.
T-Mobile's next. AT&T, we hope by the end of Q2, but they're
Yep.
working on it. We've been talking to them. We don't
Yep.
know the costs yet. We don't know the surcharges and fees, but I think the important thing here, Mike, is there will be surcharges, right? Right.
That's what we are hearing. I don't
Yeah.
know specifically who or how much or
Right.
any of that, but I
That's right.
think it's going to, the pricing structure is going to be very similar to SMS and MMS
Yeah.
at this point. But there are, like in Germany, we're working directly with the German carriers, and one of the models they have that's very interesting is a monthly active user. So it's
Oh,
almost like a newsletter subscription type pricing where you're able to receive, right, messages over a time period, unlimited during that time period. So I think there's a lot of different ways that it'll be put together globally. A lot of different people are trying different things,
yeah.
but it'll all start with, here's a message cost, and then yeah, there
Yeah.
there will certainly be surcharges. So
Well, Michael, I also understand there's two ways to do this, right? It's per message, but there's also the idea of a session, right? And
yep,
those will be charged differently. So
correct.
a
So
session's like a time period. Sorry.
yep,
Yeah.
no, a session is really like a 24-hour window if you think
Uh,
about it like that, right? You start your interaction, that starts the clock, and then during that period of time, you have the ability to send as many messages back and forth as you would like. So
gotcha.
that, I think will be adjusted over time also. I don't know if it will stay 24 hours forever for obvious reasons. Um, but it's another way of looking at it, and then that really comes down to, are all of the carriers going to support that?
Yeah.
Or is that one of the right? And that's a lot of, back to this slide, a lot of that's being worked out right now. So,
Yep. Exactly. And we mentioned here, obviously, Apple's going to continue to expand as people update their OS.
yep.
I'm not sure what the percentage is now, but sometimes they're a little slow to roll out their updates, but it does work on the last, I think, is it 4 or 5 generations of I don't know, remember when I was looking, but the
It,
vast majority of iPhones support it.
it's really, yeah, it's really about the OS.
Yeah.
And, if you look online and right, there's charts that show,
Yeah.
a new version of iOS comes out and 40%, and then 3 months later, right?
Yeah.
So it just
Right.
takes time for everybody to kind of, get on board and
Yeah.
upgrade uh, everything.
Yep.
So
Yep. And obviously, Commio, we're working hard and fast on getting this implemented and being that carrier layer and also working on the experience side. So that's exciting. And I think
yep,
last but not least too is just to reiterate that know your customer is critical. So we already know that that's a big thing today with voice and messaging, but for this, what's nice is that you go through a very similar sort of cadence to make sure that all your individual brands are properly, KYC'd, but it's going to go through Google Verify, and so you'll have that higher level of trust, which is great. And again, we're trying to clean up the ecosystem, and this is one way to do it with KYC and know your customer. Yeah, know your customer. So, and RCS is going to help with that.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
yeah. So what I know more, and I already teased it earlier, is that we are going to do a follow-up webinar to this, going from boring to brilliant with examples. So Alan, you asked about use cases earlier. So we'll have those with how to drive better experiences and show some great examples. Then go through those with you guys on a shorter presentation. This one went a little long, which is fine. I think we always sort of the initial webinars for these things tend to go a little long. So I appreciate everybody hanging in. We got the whole group with us here to the end. So let me go back to a couple of questions, Michael. So one of them
Yeah,
was
sure.
from Preston. He said, I've heard that WhatsApp, for instance, has rules that you can't, as a business, send the first message. Your customer has to message you first, and then you can message them. Does RCS have a similar restriction?
No, not at this point. RCS, that's one of the beauties of it is that if you have an existing SMS or maybe you have existing text messaging list,
Mhm.
those people are opted in for SMS, MMS, and RCS. So you have the ability to start pushing RCS content to those users. Um,
Great.
Based upon that, obviously all the opt-ins and all the permission, all that kind of fun stuff. But
Yeah.
no, you have the ability to start pushing out, RCS content to people that have supported devices, just like Tim showed us with his iPhone.
There you go. There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Preston says, thank you. Seems like it will be really
Yeah.
difficult to get everyone to opt into the new channel. And as long as there's a normalization of texting, it should be great. So that makes sense. That's awesome. Mark, sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just
So
going to say, Preston, it would be a waste of time to try to get everybody to opt back in. So yes,
well,
yes.
he's probably referring to, as well as we both know, this one-to-one consent stuff that
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
paused. Like, but we all need to be operating under that anyway. Like one
Right.
consent to one brand is kind of the way it's going to be, whether or not it's enforced today or not. But
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Which, guys, it's just, why is it so hard to do business these days? It's so hard. I understand it from the customer standpoint, but wow, it just anyway. Mark also asked, he said, hey, I'm routing and queuing SMS for my contact center. What are the implications, if any, where RCS is enabled or part of the message? Are there different APIs required for my interactions and the contact center?
So, I can speak to our solution. I don't know how everybody else's works, but when you go to send a message through our platform, we do what's referred to as device detection. So
Mhm.
if that device supports RCS, we deliver RCS if RCS is set up and ready to go. If that device does not support RCS, then we deliver, like what we talked about, that fallback, that emulated experience to that device. So everybody gets a message. It's just, again, you're elevating the experience for the user that can get RCS, and everybody else gets what they're used to. And then over time, as more people convert and get up and running with RCS on their devices, then those devices start to receive RCS. So it's really kind of, as it starts to evolve and as it starts to roll out, you're going to have a certain portion that's RCS and SMS and MMS, and then that portion will start to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, yeah, which is great. It just feels like it's all interconnecting well, and it's not gonna interrupt what we're already doing, and it'll give us new capabilities that we can test into and look at the data, which is fantastic.
Well, and that's the thing, Tim. The harder you make this, the less people are going to do it and they're going to run.
Yeah.
because you
Right.
can't, like, I don't understand. And I think that's a lot of what's going on with RCS is I think that there is, I wouldn't call it misunderstanding, but
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of education and awareness out there around like really what RCS is.
Yep.
Um,
Right.
I think people get, I can have a logo and a check mark, but once you start to get outside of that, like really what is possible, what can people do,
Yep.
what kind of cool use cases are there? And that's really the next webinar. There's a
Yes.
whole ton of very,
Yeah.
very cool stuff we can talk about that, we're starting to have conversations with people about, but also, ideas we have around where RCS fits.
Yeah. And by the way, just you guys register for this webinar. We'll definitely, obviously, we'll be setting up a recording of this session, and we'll invite you to the next one or two that we'll be doing. And you keep your eyes on Commio and Commio's blog, for instance. Like we already have some good examples in there, and we'll continue to communicate about this as we get closer and closer to this being commercially available. It was really exciting. It's an exciting time to be working through all this. But I guess with that, we don't have any more questions, Michael, but I want to say super thankful for hanging in for us for this long, and love native message. I love that we're talking to each other about, where this is going. RCS
Yep.
is exciting. And yeah, love to have you back for our next one as well. And
No,
we'll,
I can't wait.
yeah, well, cool. And hopefully we've educated a good, there's more than 70 people on the webinar today. So it's going to take 70. We're going to have to keep going, educate the rest of the marketplace. So, yeah. So again, thanks
No, and
everybody.
that's like,
Yeah.
yeah, as I tell everybody, you'll walk away knowing more at the end than you did at the beginning. And then that's the baseline. And then you start to learn more and then you start to educate yourself more and really start to understand, where does it fit? Right. Because again, it's not going to come in and replace everything. WhatsApp isn't going away, right? Everything isn't getting, it's another channel. It's another opportunity to reach your customers, in a very rich UI that just exists on their device already.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Mike, and thanks again for everybody for hanging in today. And like I said, watch for the recording. It'll be out probably either later today or early tomorrow. By the way, reply to those emails if you have any questions. I always put my own email address on the top of those, and I don't like it when people send me marketing emails that I can't reply to. If I've got a question, I want to reply. So please reply, ask any question you'd like. And not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we are actually starting to create a list of friends and family for our initial rollout, which we don't know when that's going to be yet, but we're pretty far along in the testing phase and working through the carrier relations. And it's good to get the word out as early as possible that this is coming, and this was super helpful. So thanks again, everybody, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Michael, you as well. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tim.